Hi, I want to walk you through this article, which in the past some of my students have found a little bit challenging. And so I want to, and as I read through it, I see why. And while I find this study fascinating, I want to help you grasp the main outcomes without draining all of your cognitive resources, which I want you to save for some of the later articles for today. So before you watch this video, I would like you to read the Washington Post article discussing Linda Babcock's research and to read the abstract and introduction to this article. So before you read the rest of this article, or before you listen to the rest of this video, you should understand three things. First, that there is a gender pay gap. Probably were aware of this before taking this class. It's estimated women make about 80 cents on a dollar to what a man makes for doing the exact same work. So women are compensated less. Now, what you maybe didn't know is that a key reason for this gap is that women are less likely to ask. They are less likely to negotiate for the higher salary. They're less likely to ask for a raise. They're less likely to ask for things like bonuses or teaching assignments or other more peripheral things. So one reason that they make less money is that they don't ask for more money. But there's a reason they don't ask. They're less likely to ask because they're penalized for asking. And specifically, and I want you to think about this in terms of the warmth competence that we have been discussing. Women who ask for more, for higher salary, for a raise, are seen as equally competent as men who do so, but less warm, less likable. They are seen as more difficult, more troublesome, more difficult to get along with. So women take a hit for asking and therefore are less likely to do so. So the goal of this article is to figure out right now at this particular moment, is there a way that women can ask that will get them the increase in salary, but not hurt them in terms of their likability or warmth? So this article is testing out different scripts, different sort of dialogues that women can initiate for negotiating for a salary and looking at the effects. And specifically, there's two things that we're really interested in. We want to see, are they more likely to get the higher salary if they ask a certain way versus another? And can we find a way to ask that doesn't take that social penalty, that doesn't make them seem less warm? Now, one thing that we know is that women who do ask for something using a relational account, really expressing concern for others, are not perceived negatively. So it can be okay for women to be aggressive if she's doing so on behalf of someone else. Then we kind of interpretate it, she's not violating gender stereotypes. I sometimes call this the mama bear thing. It's okay for women to be a mama bear, to protect children, to protect somebody vulnerable. In that case, you can be a little more aggressive or assertive. Now, of course, if you're asking for a higher salary, how can you be that mama bear? How can you advocate for somebody else in that context? So we're looking at a variety of different ways to try to ask. So I want to direct your attention to the 5th page of this article, page 84, where we start seeing some of these scripts. The very first one is the baseline. This is a simple, straightforward, just ask for it script where they just say, hey, I understand there's a range. I think I should be paid at the top of this range. Moreover, I want a bonus. So it's the straight, unadorned script. Then they suggest a relational script condition, which adds to that some stuff. And it's okay if you see this is kind of cringy. You know, I hope it's okay. I'd feel terrible if I offended you in asking. Relationships are very important. Would you be open to talking with me about higher compensation? So this is the relational script condition, which I'm going to refer to as the cringy condition. And even though I'm using kind of a derogatory term for it, maybe it works. And if it works, and if it is going to make a difference in your salary outcomes, which is not just for one job or one situation, but because every future situation is kind of based on the salary you made previously, it can have a lifetime outcome that comes out to like $100,000 or more, or $1 million over a lifetime. So it might be worthwhile to be cringy for a little bit if it's going to get you what you want. Now, the next script that they test is the outside offer, and this is kind of the equivalent of a mama bear in that, okay, there's somebody else out there who also wants me, and they're going to pay more. So a question you might have with this is, does this work? Does this backfire because it looks kind of selfish, kind of aggressive? And then the final thing they do is combine the cringy with the outside offer account. And so I want to direct your attention to this table on page 86 of the article. And let me just put up a blank screen for a second so I don't overwhelm you. So I want to take you through the process of both seeing the good things, the things that ultimately work out, as well as the things that are less successful, so that you get a sense of how this research is done and accumulates over time. So looking at this table, here are the female negotiators. And what they did was had women and men actors say those scripts with the exact same intonation and had people rate them. And so let's first look at the negotiation outcome. That's whether or not the person negotiating will get their request. And so for the women, we see that this is on a 6-point scale, so people aren't, given other information, they aren't particularly likely to grant the request. But we see that over the different scripts here, women's outcome goes up. And that particularly the one that combined both the cringy script with the outside offer, I have a competitive offer, she was most likely to get the negotiation, most likely to have her request granted. For the men, and this is what's really interesting here, for the men, the thing to look at is it does not make a difference what script they use. The outcome is the same. And what these A's mean, so the A's are meant to read across rows. If everything across the row has an A on it, it means they are statistically the same. They're just due to like one or two people maybe being a little bit different. They're due to chance. Whereas if there's A's and B's across the row, the A's and B's are statistically significant. So we see here that the simple request has an A, whereas the combined cringy plus outside offer has a B. So that is statistically significant. However, in terms of the social outcome, which is where the women really take a hit, the one that does the best, unfortunately, is that cringy script. Though the woman is also seen as more deferential. Well, she's seen as more deferential using this combined account. So you can look at this some more if you want, just to give you some information. If you want to look at it a little bit more, these daggers indicate that there's a difference between genders. So down the same column. So that this difference here on social outcomes between women and men is statistically significant. Here on relational means that she's perceived or he's perceived as caring about other people, as caring about relationships. And so this cringy script made the person seem more concerned about relationships. The differential is kind of what you would think that it means. The overall thing to take away from this is this first attempt doesn't really introduce a clear winner. There's no one thing that improves the likelihood that she will get the salary increase and will also be perceived as likable, easy to get along with, easy to work with. The other thing to take away is that while there's a lot of movement on how women are perceived, there is not for men. And this indicates that for women, there can be a really fine line in asking for things and in behaving in a counter stereotypical way. So let's jump to page 88, where they're redoing the study again and testing out some different scripts. And so this one we call the supervisor excuse. And it says, my team leader told me to ask, or my trusted advisor or my mentor told me to ask. And so it sort of puts the blame for the ask on somebody else. So we could think about this as kind of the patriarchal patriarchal way of asking, saying, it's not me, it's somebody else who is a perceived authority figure, whether or not that authority figure is male or female. And then the next script that they test is the skills contribution script. Now this last one, and this is the last one that we're going to look at for this article, is the skill contribution, where it reframes the act of negotiation as a skill that this person brings to the job. I think this is kind of clever. So I'm hopeful you'll see my skill at negotiating as something important that I bring to the job. So now let's look at how these scripts do. Here are the female negotiators. Here's the simple one that we saw from the first study, baseline. The supervisor, blaming it on the supervisor. And here is saying negotiation is a skill I bring to the table. And what we should see, let's look at the negotiation outcome. Both of these, the woman is more likely to get the request, and she is more likely to be seen as warm, as likable. She is not getting what we call the social penalty as difficult here. What we also see here is that she's also actually doing better than the man in this condition. Again, for the men, we see no difference across the board. Now, last thing, if you're interested in what these figures are, they're called mediational analyses. This is a particularly complicated one. Basically, what this is saying is it's trying to show why it works, why the supervisor excuse and the skills contribution work. And both of them work is because the woman is seen as caring about relationships, and so that leads to a higher social outcome. She's seen as more likable, and both of those allow her to be seen as caring about relationships, and they're both seen as legitimate, which leads to her more likely to get the negotiation request, to be granted the higher salary. So now I have a task for you all to do to go with this article, where I want you to practice negotiating for something. And so what's behind this is I want you to see negotiation as a feminist activity, something that you need to do, and to really understand the whole social context of why this is so difficult for you to do. The more that women negotiate, the more that people will get used to seeing that, the more normal it will seem, the more acceptable it will be. And then we might not have to do these things. So what I want you to do is imagine yourself in the situation and prepare for this. And I want you to have different options in order to do this. Now we're going to skip over that outside offer account because you won't necessarily have an outside offer. And that's kind of a rare situation, a more unique situation. Now I want you to practice the cringy script, even though this you might not feel comfortable using it. It didn't work as well, I think, as these others. It still works better than the straightforward just asking for things. And there are contexts, there are situations where maybe for a particular individual, you're like, I'll go ahead and do this. I'll share my experiences with using this in class. I'll save that for class. So I want you to write these out. We're going to share them with each other. I really want you to imagine yourself, to try to visualize yourself in the situation, because asking for things is a feminist activity and something that can make a huge difference in terms of your overall life trajectory.